Yanni Licavoli, Gordon Novell, Sam Shepard. Three notorious characters who sought refuge in Gahanna, all in a short 6-year span between 1967 and 1973. If you're like me, you might ask, why Gahanna? Was it just a set of random circumstances, or was there something about Gahanna? We'll never know for sure, but we do know these characters' stories reach far beyond Gahanna. It's said that people are complicated, but by all accounts, Yanni Licavoli was a simple, brutish criminal. Though he was valedictorian of his high school class and his parents' career choice for him was the priesthood, Yanni instead chose a life of crime. During Prohibition, he was a bootlegger in Detroit and eventually Toledo. Though he was linked to 20 murders, he was convicted of 4. He never pulled the trigger himself, but was ultimately found guilty of conspiracy murder, making him the first person in Ohio history to be convicted of murder in the first degree without committing the murder, or even being at the scene of the crime. Yanni served 37 years in the Ohio pen. In 1970, Governor James Rhodes commuted his sentence to second-degree murder, and he was finally paroled in 1972 due to his failing health. Licavoli's parole ruled out Detroit and Toledo as places he could live, so Yanni and his wife Zena moved in with their daughter's family here in Gahanna, where he died in September of 1973. This photo presents a strange juxtaposition. This old mobster and murderer sitting on a couch with his cute granddaughters under a sign obviously made for him by them. Maybe he was more complicated than I thought. But when it comes to complicated, it would be tough to top New Orleans gadfly Gordon Novell. This guy was believed to be involved in the Bay of Pigs, the Kennedy assassination, Watergate, and the Waco siege. He was business partner of John DeLorean, provided security for Jean-Claude Van Damme and Michael Jackson, and claimed to have put the dress on J. Edgar Hoover. Later in his life, he was involved in UFO and anti-gravity device research. In 1967, when New Orleans prosecutor Jim Garrison indicted Clay Shaw on conspiracy charges related to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, Novell was subpoenaed as a material witness. Knowing Garrison would be after him, Novell had fled New Orleans and landed in central Ohio, the home of his Playboy Club bunny fiancée, Abby Mulligan. He was arrested by Gahanna's finest on April Fool's Day, 1967. Novell used the media spotlight to congratulate the small Gahanna Police Department. They are to be praised in doing what the supposed master crime solver Jim Garrison, with all of his police state inquisition power, money, intimidation, and harassment, couldn't do. Once again, Governor James Rhodes enters the story. He refused to extradite Novell if Garrison wanted him for questioning in connection with the Kennedy assassination. Kinda makes you wonder. But even though most Americans still agree with Garrison, his investigation eventually ran out of steam, and Gordon Novell went on to compile his long list of bizarre connections until his death in 2012. Of these three notorious characters, the most compelling is Dr. Sam Shepard. Shepard was a young, handsome, osteopathic neurosurgeon from Bay Village, Ohio, with a beautiful wife and home. Sam burst into the spotlight in 1954 when his wife Marilyn was brutally murdered on the night of July 4. He claimed a tall, bushy-haired intruder had murdered his wife and injured him in a scuffle. I'm leaving out the gory details, but as time went on, Sam's version of the story became less believable to the public as well as the police and prosecutors, especially when Sam's affair with a young nurse was exposed. Sam was indicted and eventually convicted of second-degree murder with a life sentence and possibility of parole in 10 years. Although the list of 20th century trials that were called the trial of the century is quite long, the Sam Shepard trial is certainly on that list. Many people called it a media circus, and concerns were raised about the fairness of the trial. A wealthy divorcee from Dusseldorf, Germany, Ariane Tebben-Johans, became enamored with Sam's story and began corresponding with the Shepard family and eventually with Sam himself. In 1961, a young attorney named F. Lee Bailey agreed to represent Shepard, and by 1964, Sam was released by a district court decision. Ariane had moved to Ohio, and she and Sam were married upon his release. However, the state of Ohio appealed in federal court and won. But that F. Lee Bailey guy was something else, and when he took Sam's case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, he won again. So in 1966, Shepard got a second trial and was found not guilty. Many people believe the TV show, The Fugitive, about a doctor wrongly accused of killing his wife, had something to do with the verdict, and that the show was based on the Shepard case.
Starring David Jansen as Dr. Richard Kimball, an innocent victim of blind justice.
Roy Huggins, creator of The Fugitive, always insisted that the show was not based on Shepard, and people who promote that theory are in reckless disregard of the truth, a phrase that seems fitting when talking about the Shepard case on the whole. Sorry, Roy, but the court of public opinion says The Fugitive, it's based on Sam Shepard. After Shepard's release, he got his medical license back in 1968 and was granted admitting and surgical privileges at a Youngstown hospital. No one knows for sure if Sam killed his wife, but there is no doubt he was a killer in the operating room. Within a 3-month period, Shepard's scalpel nicked the arteries of Mary Duffy, a 40-year-old mother of 5, and 29-year-old Samuel Lopez. Both patients died, both families sued, and Sam's surgical career was over for good. The good of humanity. Later that year, Sam's prison pen pal wife Arian filed for divorce amidst allegations including alcohol abuse. By the time Sam Shepard settled in Gahanna in 1969, he was a broken man. Many books, magazines, newspapers, and personal accounts mention Sam's Gahanna sojourn, but none seem to agree on his exact address. From what I can piece together, I believe he stayed at the Executive at 130 Mill Street and set up a small medical practice at 72 Mill Street above Bunny Giroux's antique shop. Or maybe those two were switched. The practice was anything but successful, and Sam was ready for another change. One day he walked into a hair salon with a woman he had been seeing named Sharon. A young stylist named Colleen recognized Shepard and phoned her father, George Strickland, a professional wrestler and promoter. "You'll never guess who's in the shop," she told her dad, who hurried down to talk to Shepard. Sam had always been athletic and loved wrestling in high school and in the pen, so it wasn't long before George convinced Sam to turn pro. A Cleveland newspaper wrote, "High on anybody's you gotta be kidding list is the no-joke announcement that Dr. Sam Shepard will make his debut as a professional wrestler." Strickland and Shepard wrestled as a tag team. George trained and promoted Sam, although how much promotion did Sam Shepard need, especially when he wrestled under the moniker Killer Shepard? Sam had become infatuated with George's daughter Colleen, and in October of 1969 the two eloped to Mexico. Colleen's mother, Betty, responded to reporters, "It happened very suddenly. Dr. Sam is a man full of surprises." But Dr. Sam had one more surprise up the sleeve of his white coat. You see, every pro wrestler needs a signature move, and so Shepard invented the mandibular nerve pinch.
And that's where Jimmy told me about the history of the mandible claw, and Dr. Sam Shepard, the real-life physician upon whom the TV show and later the movie The Fugitive was based.
It has become known as the mandible claw.
And Corny thought that would be a good hold for me. Pitched it to Bill Watts. He went with the "why wouldn't I bite your damn fingers off?" I went with "it's paralyzing nerve hold, finger, tongue underneath the tongue."
And is one of the most enduring of all signature holds, being popularized in the 90s by Mick Foley as Mankind.
The mandible claw!
And reinvigorated by the late Bray Wyatt and his Fiend persona in 2019. The move is currently employed by women wrestlers
Mandible claw! The mandible claw!
Sue Young, aka Undead Bride, and in Irony Overload by wrestling dentist Dr. Britt Baker.
The lockjaw!
And though her hold is called the lockjaw, Dr. Baker knows the correct name.
You took Shaz McKenzie out by raking her teeth, I believe, over the top rope.
Mandible claw.
And so, in the theater of the absurd that is professional wrestling, Dr. Sam Shepard enjoys a lasting legacy. By March of 1970, Sam was predicting his death. In 1958, he had been a willing participant in the infamous Sloan Kettering Cancer Research Program at the Ohio Penitentiary and was injected with live cancer cells. Though subsequent testing revealed no cancer according to doctors, Sam believed he had the disease 12 years later. On the 3rd of April, he fell severely ill. He collapsed and died on the floor of his in-laws' kitchen on April 6. His death was ruled as liver failure, and many have alleged it was from alcohol abuse. But once again, truth is elusive in the case of Sam Shepard. But one thing we do know for sure is that Gahanna was the last place Dr. Sam tried to live any kind of a normal life. Too bad he couldn't pull it off. Licavoli, Novell, Shepard. Like it or not, these names will forever be linked to Gahanna's history. I don't know about you, but I kind of like it.